The night on planet Valtor 7 was not just cold, it was cruel. The wind screamed across the empty plains like a beast searching for prey, rattling the thin metal poles of a lonely human tent set near the frozen cliffs. Snowflakes fell fiercely, dancing in the air before crashing against the white ground. Every breath turned into ice. Inside the tent, a small heater struggled to push away the freezing air, its tiny flames flickering weakly. Captain Elias Morgan, a human explorer who had seen many worlds but forgotten how to call any of them home, sat quietly, rubbing his numb hands together. His beard was frosted and his eyes looked tired, but he kept checking the heater, the water supplies, and the weather screen. He knew this storm was different. This one wanted to kill. He had been alone for months, mapping the frozen terrain of Valtor 7 for future settlements. Silence had become his only friend, the cold his only enemy. But tonight something changed. Through the howling wind, Elias heard a sound, soft, weak, almost lost in the storm. It was like a cry. He frowned and stood up quickly. No one else should be here. He unzipped the tent door and the cold stung his face like knives. Then he saw them. A woman and a small girl, both alien, stumbling through the snow. Their skin was pale blue like the winter sky, their eyes silver and dull with exhaustion. The girl was no older than 7 or 8. She clung to her mother's arm, her thin clothes soaked and shaking. Her lips were purple. She was close to death. The mother's steps were unsteady, but she pushed forward. When she saw Elias, hope flickered in her eyes for a second before fear covered it again. She fell to her knees in the snow and lowered her head. Her voice trembled. Please, help us. Just one night. My daughter. She cannot take more. Elias didn't think twice. Come inside, he said firmly. He rushed toward them, wrapping his heavy coat around the little girl first, then guiding them both into the tent. Inside, the heater's weak warmth touched their frozen skin. The child curled into her mother's lap, teeth clattering, small hands stiff as stone. The mother held her close, trying to give what little warmth she had left. Elias moved quickly. He set dry blankets around them and handed a heating pad to the mother. He opened a ration pack, warm vegetable broth, and placed it in the mother's hands. Get this into her, he said gently. The little girl took a sip and a small sound came from her, half sob, half relief. Her silver eyes looked up at Elias. She tried to smile but was too weak. The mother's eyes filled with tears she did not let fall. Thank you. Human. Elias shook his head. Save your strength. You're safe here. For a moment silence returned, but it was different now. It wasn't empty. It held fear, hope, and something fragile. Trust. The mother gently brushed the girl's hair with trembling fingers. She whispered something in her own language, soft and full of love. Elias did not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. Outside, the storm grew stronger. The wind screamed louder, but inside that small tent, 3 lives sat close to a dying heater, fighting for warmth and life. Elias stared quietly at the girl, then at her mother. He didn't know who they were, where they came from, or why they were running, but he knew one thing. Tonight he was no longer alone. The small tent felt fragile against the roar of the storm outside. Snow lashed against the thin fabric, and the heater's flames flickered like a dying heartbeat. Elias Morgan knelt beside the mother and her daughter, watching the girl's tiny body shiver in her mother's arms. Her silver eyes were wide with fear, but even in that small, terrified gaze, there was a spark, a fragile hope. The mother whispered to her daughter, her voice soft and trembling, but the cold still stole her warmth. Elias poured the last bit of broth into a small cup and gently placed it in the child's hands. Drink slowly, he said. The girl did, her teeth chattering so hard that the cup rattled. After a few careful sips, her body relaxed just enough to let out a quiet sigh. The mother watched her daughter, tears brimming but refusing to fall. We ran for days, she said finally, her voice cracked. Our home, destroyed, raiders. They left nothing. Her gaze met Elias's, desperate and raw. We have no one left. Elias nodded, trying to hide his own unease. He had faced dangerous storms, alien predators, and even mechanical failures, but he had never seen a mother's desperation in this way. He realized that survival was not just a battle against the elements, it was a fight against despair itself. And tonight, he had to fight with them. The temperature in the tent dropped further. The heater hissed and groaned, its warmth barely reaching the mother and child. Elias moved closer, pulling his coat tighter around them, but the shivering persisted. The girl's small hands clawed at her mother's chest, seeking warmth that her mother herself struggled to provide. The mother, her teeth chattering, glanced at Elias with eyes that shone with a mixture of fear and a hard, painful resolve. I will offer myself, she whispered finally, voice trembling so much that Elias had to lean in closer to hear. I can give my body warmth to keep her alive. You may take whatever you want as payment. Her eyes searched his face, pleading. Do this, so she lives. Elias froze, his heart hammering. He had known humans were capable of many things, but he had never faced such an offer before. There was no malice in her words, only the raw, desperate love of a mother willing to sacrifice herself. He could feel her fear, her exhaustion, and the weight of the hopelessness she carried. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder, firm but gentle. No, he said softly. You don't have to give me anything, nothing. Just sit here and stay alive. That's all that matters. His voice was calm, almost commanding, and in it was a quiet certainty that seemed to cut through the storm outside. The mother blinked, confusion and disbelief crossing her face. She had expected anyone, to see her as a means to take what she offered in desperation. But Elias, he did not. He simply looked at them, steady and warm, offering something she had not felt in days. Safety. The child, sensing the tension, clutched her mother's coat tighter. Elias slowly moved closer, kneeling beside them. Come, he said softly, motioning for them to lean against him. The cold doesn't care about pride. We survive together. With trembling hands, the mother leaned forward, holding her daughter closer, and Elias wrapped his arms around them both. His body radiated warmth, but it was more than that. There was a steadiness, a quiet heartbeat that the mother could feel even through the layers of fear and cold. She realized something profound in that moment. This human was offering more than heat. He was offering trust, protection, and heart. The little girl's shivering slowed. Her eyes fluttered shut, exhausted and finally safe. The mother pressed her lips to the child's head, whispering words of comfort in her own language. Words Elias could not understand but felt in their meaning. For the first time in days, the mother allowed herself to breathe. And for the first time, she felt that warmth could come from something other than her own body. From someone else, someone human, whose heart burned brighter than the cold outside. Outside, the wind continued its furious assault, but inside that small tent, 3 lives huddled together, finding the first true warmth in what felt like forever. The wind outside raged with a fury that made the tent shiver and groan, yet inside there was a fragile calm. Elias Morgan sat cross-legged on the cold floor, keeping his arms wrapped around the mother and her daughter. The little girl had finally stopped trembling, her small body buried into her mother's chest, and her eyes slowly closing as exhaustion overtook her. She was still weak, but for the first time she was safe, warm, and alive. The mother's voice trembled as she whispered to her daughter in her own language, words full of love and protection. Elias did not understand the words, yet the meaning was clear. Each word carried the weight of sacrifice, of endless nights spent protecting someone smaller and more fragile than herself. She had offered herself to the cold, willing to give everything for her child, but now she had not just warmth, she had a human's heart to shield them. Elias shifted slightly, adjusting the blanket so they would cover both of them more effectively. He glanced at the mother's face, streaked with frost and worry, and he felt a sharp pang in his chest. Humans were strange creatures, he knew, capable of love, loss, and courage in ways the galaxy often underestimated. And tonight his humanity was their salvation. "You've done enough," Elias said gently. "You're safe now. That's what matters. The cold won't win here." The mother's eyes widened, disbelief and hope warring within her. She had expected gratitude, perhaps hesitation, but she had not expected such words, simple and honest. Her hands, trembling from both cold and relief, slowly lifted to rest on Elias's arm. She did not touch him in the way she had feared earlier. Not as an offering or a payment, but as thanks, as acknowledgement that someone's heart could be stronger than the storm itself. The little girl stirred in her mother's arms, murmuring softly. "Human. Warm," she whispered, her tiny hand reaching for Elias. She grasped his sleeve, holding on as if his presence alone could keep the icy fingers of the night away. Elias smiled softly, brushing a strand of her silver hair from her forehead. "Yes," he said. "Warm and safe. You can sleep now." Hours passed. The storm outside continued, relentless and merciless, but the little trio in the tent remained undisturbed. Elias kept one eye on the heater, ready to feed it fuel, and the other on his charges. He had faced countless dangers in his life, from starship malfunctions to hostile worlds. But there was something profoundly human about protecting someone simply because it was the right thing to do. It was instinct, compassion, and bravery all in one. He realized that this small act of kindness was more than survival. It was the soul of humanity shining in the darkness. The mother finally spoke, voice soft but laced with emotion. Why help us?" she asked. "We have nothing to give you, nothing." Elias's gaze softened. His own hand, still slightly numb from the cold, rested over hers, offering warmth without expectation. "I had a daughter once," he said quietly. She died because I couldn't protect her. If I can save someone now, if I can give someone a chance at life and love, then I must. That's all I need." Tears welled in the mother's eyes. She did not cry, but her breath trembled, her heart finally beginning to ease from the tight grip of fear. The little girl pressed closer, as if sensing the unspoken bond forming in that small, dimly lit tent. Trust was being built slowly, quietly through heartbeats and warmth rather than words or promises. Elias adjusted his position, holding them both closer. "We'll survive this storm together," he whispered. "No one gets left behind. Not tonight." Outside, the cold howled. Inside, a small human heartbeat kept them alive. For the first time in days, the mother allowed herself to believe it. Someone else could protect her child. Someone else could be the warmth she could no longer provide alone. And that someone was human. As the night deepened, the little girl's eyes finally closed in peaceful sleep, the mother leaning into Elias with silent gratitude. And he kept them both wrapped in the only warmth that mattered, the human heart, steady and unyielding, stronger than any storm. Morning came slowly on Valtor 7, though the storm outside had not yet eased. Snow piled high against the tent, and every gust of wind made the thin walls shiver and groan. Inside, the small heater continued to struggle, but the warmth Elias provided with his presence was steady and unyielding. The little girl lay curled against her mother, breathing softly while Elias kept watch, his mind alert to every sound outside the fragile fabric. The mother stirred, slowly lifting her head and brushing her wet hair from her face. She glanced at Elias, who sat close by, tired eyes scanning the storm. A strange mix of awe and gratitude filled her gaze. She had seen desperate beings before, but never anyone like this human. His warmth was more than physical. It was a quiet, steady force that seemed to push back the cold, the fear, and even the hopelessness that had been her constant companion. You stayed awake all night," she whispered. Her voice was weak, but it carried the weight of her amazement. "Why? You could have rested. You could have left us." "Why not?" Elias looked at her, his eyes calm and gentle. "Because no one should face the storm alone," he said softly. "You've already suffered enough. Tonight you and your daughter were not alone. That's all that matters." The mother's lips trembled. She looked down at her child, then back at Elias. "No one has ever said that to me," she murmured. Not like that. Not with truth in their voice. Everyone else. Everyone wanted something. Payment, loyalty, obedience, but you offer nothing. Only warmth and safety. Elias nodded, but he did not speak. Words had limits. Actions had power. He continued to keep them close, letting them feel the steady human heartbeat that had kept the girl from freezing the night before. Trust was built slowly like small bricks against the cold, and he knew this night was the first brick in something stronger than fear. The little girl stirred, lifting her sleepy silver eyes to meet Elias's. She reached out a trembling hand, brushing against his sleeve. "Human," she whispered. "Safe." Her voice was fragile, but there was relief in it. Relief she had not known for days. Elias smiled softly and nodded, offering her a warm, gentle pat on the head. "Safe," he said. "Always safe here." The mother exhaled a shaky breath and leaned back, letting herself feel the human warmth again. I have never trusted anyone like this," she admitted. "Not even my own people. We always have to protect ourselves first, but you make it easy to believe we can survive without hiding." Elias shrugged, a small smile playing on his frost-chapped lips. "Survival is more than hiding," he said simply. "It's about protecting those who need protection, even when it's dangerous. That's human, and that's what we can offer." For a long moment, silence fell over the tent, broken only by the occasional hiss of the heater and the wind outside. Yet in that silence, the mother felt something she had not felt in weeks: relief, gratitude, and slowly a fragile hope. She realized that the warmth she had feared losing to the storm, the warmth she thought only her own body could provide, was now something else. It was human, steady and strong. She could lean on it. She could trust it. Hours passed. The storm showed no signs of ending, but the tent felt less like a prison and more like a sanctuary. Elias remained close, letting them feel his strength without demanding anything in return. He had taught them an unspoken lesson, that even in a world as harsh and cold as Valtor 7, kindness and courage could defy the cold, and a human heart could be warmer than any fire. The mother finally spoke again, softer this time, almost a whisper. "You saved us last night," she said, voice trembling. "Not just our bodies, our hearts. You gave us trust. You gave us hope. I do not know how to thank you." Elias shook his head. "No thanks needed," he said quietly. "You and your daughter, surviving safe, alive, that is enough. That is all the reward a human needs." Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the small tent, 3 hearts beat together: mother, child, and human. And in that fragile unity, something stronger than snow and ice began to grow, a bond built not on obligation, but on warmth, trust, and hope. The storm outside the tent showed no mercy. Snow whipped across the frozen plains of Valtor 7, cutting through any attempt at warmth. The small tent, which had felt like a sanctuary only hours before, now trembled and groaned under the relentless wind. Elias Morgan's eyes scanned the whiteness beyond the thin fabric. He had faced harsh worlds before, but this storm felt alive, cruel and unforgiving. As he checked the heat level of the struggling heater, a sudden noise made him freeze. A shadow moved in the snow outside, a figure hunched and moving with purpose. Elias's instincts kicked in. He moved silently to the entrance of the tent, peeking through the flap. It was not the storm alone. Armed scavengers were approaching, hunters who had chased the mother and her daughter across miles of snow and ice. Their eyes glinted with greed, weapons raised, and their intent was clear. Elias felt a surge of adrenaline. He had expected danger from nature, but the cold heart of other beings was far more unpredictable. Inside the tent, the mother clutched her daughter tightly. They found us," she whispered, her voice trembling. Fear and desperation flickered in her silver eyes. She had spent days running, hiding, and surviving. Now the nightmare had returned. Elias knelt beside them, placing a steady hand on the mother's shoulder. "Stay calm," he said firmly. "I will protect you." Whatever happens, you do not leave my side." His words carried authority, but also something else. Hope. In that moment, he became more than a human stranger. He became a shield, a force the cold and the cruel could not break. The scavengers shouted through the storm, demanding the mother and child be handed over. "Give them up, or freeze with them," their leader barked. Elias's jaw tightened. He could feel the little girl trembling under her mother's hold, her tiny hands clinging to the blanket. His heart ached. He had to act, and he had to act fast. Without hesitation, Elias moved to the front of the tent, planting himself firmly between the door and the approaching danger. "You'll have to go through me," he said, his voice steady despite the cold that bit at his skin. There was no fear, no hesitation, only a human will that refused to surrender. The mother whispered softly to her daughter, urging her to stay behind, but the girl's eyes, wide and trusting, stayed fixed on Elias. He gave her a small, reassuring nod. "It's okay," he said. "I will not let them harm you." Outside, the scavengers hesitated. They had encountered humans before, but there was something in Elias's stance, in his unwavering gaze, that made them pause. There was no anger, no threat, but there was a promise. A promise that this human would not yield, that he would fight for those weaker than himself no matter the cost. The wind howled louder, and the scavengers exchanged uneasy glances. One of them stepped forward, unsure, the cold and the human's resolve creating doubt. Then, as if on cue, the sound of a distant warning signal cut through the storm, a human distress beacon, its siren piercing the white fury of Valtor 7. Allied forces would arrive soon, and the scavengers realized the risk of staying. Panic overtook greed. The leader cursed under his breath and retreated, dragging his team back into the blizzard. Elias watched them disappear into the snow, his stance relaxing slightly but his vigilance remaining. The mother exhaled, tears streaming down her pale blue face. You risked yourself for us," she said softly, voice breaking. "Why, we are strangers." "We have nothing." Elias shook his head, brushing snow from his shoulder. "Because no one deserves to face the cold alone," he replied quietly. "Not when I can stop it." The little girl, still clinging to her mother, whispered, "Thank human." Her voice was small but full of sincerity, a sound that cut through the cold sharper than any blade. Inside the tent they huddled close again, hearts pounding but safe for now. Outside, the storm continued its rage, but inside, 3 lives had survived another night, held together by courage, compassion, and a human heart stronger than the cold and cruelty of the universe. The storm finally began to ease, though the snow still fell in soft, relentless sheets across the frozen plains. The tent, which had been battered all night, now felt quiet, almost peaceful. Inside, the heater hummed steadily, and Elias Morgan allowed himself a moment to breathe. But he stayed close to the mother and her daughter, their safety still his highest priority. The little girl was curled up in her mother's arms, her small hands clutching the blankets. Her silver eyes were half closed, heavy with sleep, yet there was a glimmer of trust and relief shining through. Elias watched her carefully, noting the slow rise and fall of her chest. She was still weak, but she was alive. The mother turned her gaze to Elias, her eyes filled with a mixture of awe, gratitude, and lingering fear. You stayed with us," she said softly, voice trembling. "Through the storm, through everything. Why? You could have left us. You could have gone on your own journey as humans always do, but you stayed." Elias shook his head gently. "Because you both matter. Tonight the cold didn't just threaten your bodies, it threatened your hope, and hope is worth protecting." His words were calm, yet they carried the quiet weight of someone who had lost before and learned the value of life and warmth. The mother's lips trembled. She had offered herself to the cold, believing it might save her child, but she had not expected this. "No one has ever helped us like this," she whispered. "No one, not my family, not my people. Never. You risked yourself for us, for my daughter." Elias glanced at the little girl, who stirred slightly and whispered, "Safe, human, heart warm." Her words were small, yet they struck Elias with profound clarity. The warmth he provided wasn't just from his body. It came from the steady pulse of compassion, courage, and humanity. That heartbeat, steady and true, was more powerful than the heater, more protective than any weapon. He moved closer and adjusted the blankets, tucking them around both mother and daughter. "The cold doesn't stand a chance when we stay together," he said softly. "We share warmth, hope, and courage. That is stronger than any storm." The mother exhaled, her body trembling not from the cold but from relief and wonder. I cannot believe this," she said quietly. You give without asking anything. You don't want payment. You don't want loyalty, you just care." Elias smiled faintly. "That is human," he said simply. "We protect, we share, we risk ourselves for others. Not for reward, not for recognition. We do it because it is right. Because we can." The little girl finally rested her head against Elias's sleeve, eyes closed in peaceful sleep. The mother leaned against him, allowing herself to relax fully for the first time in days. She whispered softly to her daughter in their own language, words of love and gratitude, and Elias felt the weight of their trust settle over him like a mantle. Hours passed, and the tent grew warmer, not from the heater alone, but from the bond they shared. Outside, the storm had left behind a world of white silence, but inside, a human, a mother, and a child had created a world of warmth, safety, and trust. The mother looked at Elias, tears glistening on her pale blue cheeks. "You had saved us," she said. "Not just from the storm, from fear, from loneliness, from hopelessness." Elias shook his head gently. "I didn't save you," he said. "We saved each other. You trusted, you survived, and you allowed me to help. That is what makes us strong. That is what makes humans human." The little girl stirred again, mumbling softly, Stay with us?" Her voice was tiny, fragile, but full of hope. Elias knelt beside them, placing a hand gently on the mother's shoulder. "Yes," he said, softly but firmly. "I will stay. You and your daughter are not alone anymore. Not tonight, not ever if you choose." In that simple moment, as the snow continued to fall outside, the three of them shared a warmth far greater than any fire. It was a warmth born from trust, courage, and the unyielding heart of a human who refused to let others suffer alone. And for the mother and daughter, it was a warmth that would never fade. The storm had passed. The plains of Valtor 7 were blanketed in a silent, frozen white, sparkling under the pale light of a distant sun. The air was cold but calm. Outside, the world seemed still, untouched. But inside the small human tent, life was stirring with something far stronger than any storm. Hope. Elias Morgan sat cross-legged, watching the mother and her daughter. The little girl's silver eyes were bright, no longer dulled by fear. She clutched a warm blanket and peeked up at him with a shy, hopeful smile. Her small voice broke the quiet, soft and trembling. Can we stay with you?" The mother's hands trembled as she looked at Elias. Her pale blue face streaked with frost and tears, but her eyes shone with gratitude. "Only if you allow it," she said quietly, her voice full of both relief and wonder. "You saved us, not just with warmth, but with your heart. You gave us hope when we had none." Elias felt a warmth in his chest deeper than any fire could provide. He looked at the two fragile beings, at the life he had helped protect, and he realized something profound. Humanity was more than survival. It was courage, compassion, and the willingness to stand for those who could not stand for themselves. "You already belong here," he said softly. "If you want, this is your home. With me you are not alone, not ever again." The mother's lips trembled as tears fell freely now. She reached down, holding her daughter tightly, and whispered words in her own language, words of gratitude, of relief, and of the promise of a new life. The little girl pressed her small face against Elias's arm, finally feeling safe in the warmth of human kindness. Hours passed, yet inside the tent, none of them noticed the chill outside. They shared small moments, smiles, whispered conversations, and quiet laughter. Elias offered them dried food, and the little girl took it slowly, savoring each bite while her mother watched with cautious joy. In that fragile space a bond formed, stronger than any snowstorm, stronger than fear itself. The mother finally spoke again, her voice steady now, full of emotion. "You didn't just save us from the cold," she said. "You saved us from loneliness, from despair, from the fear that we would face the world alone forever. You, human, gave us family. You gave us heart." Elias shook his head, his voice calm, full of certainty. "I didn't give you family. You already had it, in each other. I only helped you see it could survive. That is what humans do. We protect, we care, and we share our strength. That is all we need." The little girl looked up at him, silver eyes wide and trusting. "Human family?" she whispered. "Yes," Elias replied, his voice soft but certain. "Family is more than blood. Family is who stands with you, who warms your heart when the world is cold, and we are family now." The mother pulled them both closer, letting Elias's presence settle over them like a shield. The storm had tried to break them, but it had failed. Outside, the snow glimmered like crystal, but inside, 3 hearts beat together, steady and strong, unshaken by the fury of the universe. For the first time in days, the mother allowed herself to smile freely. The little girl laughed softly, a pure sound that filled the tent with joy. Elias felt a deep sense of peace. He had faced many challenges, many dangers, but none like this, none as meaningful. Protecting life, offering warmth, and sharing heart, it was the essence of humanity, and tonight, it had shone brighter than any storm. As the sun rose, painting the snow in golden light, the 3 of them stepped outside together. The wind still carried a chill, but it no longer mattered. Elias held the mother's hand lightly, the little girl between them, and for the first time, none of them felt alone. In the frozen world of Valtor 7, amid silence and snow, a family was born, not of blood, but of courage, warmth, and the unyielding heart of a human. And that warmth, born in the darkest night, would never fade.